येष सुप्तेषु जाग्रति येष सुप्तेषु जाग्रति कामं 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 कामपुरुषो पुरुषो निर्विमानः निर्विमानः तदेव शुक्रं तदेव शुक्रब्रह्मा तद्ब्रह्मा तदेवामृतमुच्यते तस्मिन् लोकः शतः सर्वे तदूनात्यपि कश्चन एतद्वैत 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 एतद्वैत.
Faculty for the day: Rajni Bhai Shah, Manthan Bhai Khopani. Secretary of the branch, Nirav Bhai Choksi. Direct Tax Committee Chairman and Treasurer of the branch, Harit Bhai Dhaliwal. Coordinator, Urvasi Jindal. Managing Committee Member, Bishan Bhai Shah. Past Chairman of the branch, Sanjay Bhai Shah. Seniors in the profession and my dear friends, a very good evening to all of you. Friends, first of all, I apologize that I kept you waiting for maybe 10 minutes. Actually, we were in Gandhinagar for inviting Deputy Chief Minister Nitin Bhai Patel to the GST conference. This is the first conference in India on GST that is being hosted by our institute and organized by institute and hosted by Ahmedabad branch. Friends, he has expressed his inability because they are in a cabinet meeting and entire cabinet is going to New Delhi to meet Narendra Bhai Modi. But the interaction was very fruitful and he is more than convinced that CAs are the only professionals who are the fittest for doing the audits. So I believe now the complaint that we have been having since so many years that why in VAT the chartered accountant are not given the monopoly to conduct the audits or carry out the audits. But he said just is a matter of few months only, and in this act only the chartered accountants would be given that kind of privilege. Friends, this is back to back our third meeting with the Deputy CM with regard to this GST, and on all the occasions he has assured. And in this closed room, let me share with you, when last we met the Commissioner VAT, who is the person who is key behind this GST framework that is being implemented or about to be implemented in India, Mr. Waghela, he also said the same thing, that we are more than confident and chartered accountants are the only professionals who are fittest to do such kind of audits, and nobody else should be allowed for that. So now it is to be seen, just like in Gujarat, in the other states also, this privilege remains to the chartered accountants, because the GST would be two-tier system, central and state. So central for sure, chartered accountants and yes, cost accountants have already taken the entry. But so far as the states are concerned, the states we need to see here. Friends, I would mention my special thanks to Rajni Bhai and Manthan Bhai for adhering to our request at such a short notice. Maybe 4 or 5 days back only, we called him, Rajni Bhai, we want to have a seminar or this program on tax audit. And he immediately on the phone itself, without thinking twice, he said, yes, I will do it. So, thank you very much, sir. And also to the participants, they have also registered on such a short notice, 4 days only. And yes, this auditorium is more than full, I would say. And one more apology for the GST conference, because yes, we have been receiving as many requests that we want to register. But the bare fact is that the total capacity, sitting capacity in the auditorium is 8, 8 and 8. That is 888. And we have already taken 1000 registrations in that particular program. So again, yesterday after doing a lot of brainstorming, or maybe for the last 2 days, and exploring various options that are available in the city, what we decided finally is to open the live webcast, whereby we can give the CPE credit to the members who are attending in the live webcast at the branch on the day first, that is 27th, and on 28th at the Sardar Patel itself there is an adjacent hall where we can do this live webcast. So, but there was no other option available with us whereby we could have accommodated the other chartered accountants or members. So, but yes, we assure you we would be having many more conferences on GST in the times to come. So, without taking much of the time now, I request Harit bhai to please take the program further. Thank you.
Faculty for the session, CA Rajni Shah sir, Manthan, dignitaries on the dais and off the dais, seniors in the profession and my dear friends. A very good evening to everyone. On behalf of Direct Tax Committee, I welcome you all to the lecture meeting on a topic which is the flavor of the season, that is tax audit and practical aspects of tax audit. Friends, tax audit was introduced in 1984, much before I was born or most of the young members were born. And so from manual filing to no filing and now e-filing, it has undergone various changes. So even though there are no new clauses added this year, there are a lot of practical issues that need to be discussed. And we have with us two very expert faculties. Rajni Shah sir, who I need not say anything, is an expert in direct taxes, and Manthan is a young, dynamic CA, is also a member of our direct tax committee. So without taking much of a time, I would request Urvashi to please introduce both the faculties. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. CA Rajni sir is a practicing chartered accountant and a senior partner in Rajni Shah & Associates, having an experience of about 30 years. And apart from being a CA, he is also possessing qualification of CS and CWA. Likewise, CA Manthan Kokhani is also a practicing chartered accountant and a partner in Rajni Shah & Associates. And he secured All India rank 8 in CA final examination in May 2014. I would request CA Vikas Jain sir to please welcome Rajni sir with a bouquet and memento. Now I would request CA Neerav Chaksi to welcome Manthan Kokhani with bouquet and memento. Now I would request our faculty to please take the session ahead.
Thanks Team Ahmedabad for providing us the opportunity again to speak on the subject, which is in fact antique in nature. I started my practice in the year 1984-85 when Harit told you that many of you were not born, but I was born because professionally I was born. It was the first year of my practice and it was the first year of introduction of section 44AB. Till then more than 30 years have passed, and looking at the presence over here in the hall, it proves that it is still very relevant for all of us. Yes, it provides bread and butter and roti and sabji for the conventional practitioners who are in the practice of the audit. In fact, when I was contacted, we were thinking that how to deal with such an old subject. And then we thought that instead of going to clause-wise, because in 3CB and 3CD forms, there are many clauses which by and large are not applicable to the small SSEs. There are certain clauses which are not difficult to fill in. So there are certain situations in the real life which we faced and also from our friends and colleagues. So we decided to prepare some posers and take the posers one by one, and thereby I want to see the session interactive. Rather than just delivering the lecture on the subject, I would request every one of you to make the session interactive. You can stop us any point of time. We equally are very eager to learn from you also. And if you find something wrong from our side, we will stand corrected. Before going to the posers per se, I would like to inform you, and you must be aware that the amount of responsibility and amount of accountability that we are having on our shoulders, frankly, the remuneration is not commensurate with the amount of responsibility. Many young practitioners even seniors are found sitting in Bombay and doing audit of Junagadh, or sitting in Ahmedabad signing the audit report of Baroda. Meaning thereby they are not actually doing the tax audit and they are simply signing the audit report. But now after the change in section 143(1), even during the course of processing of the returns, they are going to give utmost importance to the clauses which are filled in, or the information and the details which are given in the tax audit report, based on which necessary adjustment may be made by the department. Even during the course of assessment, we are facing day in, day out that the officers at the department are giving equal importance to the information and the details which are given in CCD report. Many of us have a belief that it is a duty of the chartered accountant to prepare 3CB and 3CD report. In fact, my view is a bit different. 3CB report, yes, it is an audit report along with the notes to be given. But so far as 3CD form is concerned, it's a statement of particulars to be prepared by the management and the SSA, and we are supposed to verify and certify the same. In real life, yes, we by and large are preparing the 3CD report based on the data and the accounts provided to us. But in fact, what I would suggest that you take signature on every page of the 3CD report from the management, because in the future if some difference of opinion arises, then you will have in your hand in form of the management representation letter and the statement of particulars that these are the information and the details provided by the management. Second issue comes up is now there are many clauses wherein you may have a difference of opinion with the management. So for example, there is an iPhone purchased of 70,000, iPhone 6 or whatever, premium mobile phones, and many management entities are arguing that these are obsolete in 1 year. So we will show it as a revenue expenditure. With an auditor, we will say it's a capital expenditure. Now how to deal with such situation? Because the management has all the rights to differ from the auditors, and auditors have equal right to differ from the management. In this situation, there has to be a note which is in form of the office note with you, duly signed by you and the management, so that in future if any difference of opinion comes up, you will have in your hand the argument, the defense with your hands. With this brief introduction, I would like to straightway go to the posers. I think you all have the copies of the posers. So I will just explain you what the poser is to start with, and then we will initiate the discussion, and then I will lead the discussion. The first poser is the question which is being asked to me maximum. I have, fortunately or unfortunately, many clients who are dealing in securities, equities and derivatives, and day in, day out the question comes up is how to compute the turnover so that we can make sure whether a particular asset is subject to tax auditor. Jhunjhunwala deals in trading of futures and options as well as intraday trading of shares and securities. During the financial year, the net profit from the various transactions was rupees 58 lakhs and the net loss was rupees 68 lakhs. He argued, he contends that since the net loss from the activity is only 10 lakhs, because there is a common account which is maintained. All the credit entries are credited in that account and debit entries are debited in that account, so the net amount is lost. The argument comes up is, I am not having the turnover of more than 100 lakhs, so I am not subject to tax audit. What to do? Whether the contention of this Jhunjhunwala is correct? No. Then, what is the turnover of in this poser?
The turnover must be more than
Total of profit and loss. So this is a view, and this is again a clarificatory in nature, because many posers will be such that we might have faced in our day-to-day practice. So yes, I'm coming to 2-3 opposite issues. Yeah, fundamentally, yes, we all agree that so far as the turnover computation is concerned, the Institute Guidance Notes also says that you have to make a total of debit and credit both, because the turnover is something which is turning over. If you are entering into a transaction in derivative market or intraday transaction in equity or commodity, what you will find is that you are buying something and selling, and whatever difference is there, you are directly passing the entry in a particular account. It is also possible that you are short selling and then again you are buying. So whatever difference is there, you are debiting or crediting the particular account. But this is something which is turning over. So the word used are sales turnover and gross receipt. Institute view and also the view of the Bombay Chartered Accountants Society in the guidance note, it says that you have to make the total of both debit and credit and then come to a conclusion whether that amount of, total amount exceeds 100 lakhs or not. So this is one part, yes, you have to make the total. Second issue comes up is how to reflect the sales and purchase in ITR. Because recently I have a case wherein they have, in the limited scrutiny, they have said that there is a mismatch of the sales. As per ITR, the sales is different. As per your P&L account, the sales is different. Because in P&L account, in indirect group, you are showing F&O trading account or intraday trading account. So the amount which is left out is shown in P&L account. So far as your ITR is concerned, it's a problem, it's a practical situation is there. So practical solution, what we thought, that we will take the credit side of that total as sales, we will put the debit side of that account as a purchase, and ultimately the net result will be the same what is there in P&L account. But in limited scrutiny we found that officer says that there is a mismatch of sales as compared to, in your P&L account and in your ITR. So there is a practical situation which is going to be there, but yes, you have to face it because there is no other way of showing your purchase and sales in ITR. So there is a second issue. Third issue is, Jatin B said, how to compute 8% or whether applicability of 44AD will be there or not. To my mind, yes, for 44AB limit, if you are comfortable for conclusion or with a conclusion that you have to make a total of debit and credit both, and if the total exceeds rupees 100 lakhs, then you are subject to 44AB tax audit. If your turnover is less than 100 lakhs, on the same principle, yes, you have to make the total of both debit and credit and then you have to compute 8% of that. But this is very funny situation because there is no ready solution for that. One argument could be, I have made only loss. It is very much possible for the persons who are dealing in derivative and share market that there is all the debit entries during the year. So in the F4 trading account, there are only all the debit entries, there is a loss of say 80 lakhs of rupees. Now I have to compute, if I consider these 80 lakhs on the principle which we are discussing, that my turnover is 80 lakhs, then on the loss of 80 lakhs, I have to compute 8% and 6,40,000 would be my income. So this is again a situation for which no ready answer is there. I would invite the audience, Jatin, what is your view on that? Because I am just giving the extreme situation. I have only loss in my trading account and still I have to consider it as a turnover and then I have to compute the 8% of the loss and then I have to show the profit. That is one of the arguments that the wordings used in 44AD is that if your income is below taxable limit, then you are outside the purview of 44AD. But there are certain views, in the professional interest, we are seeing that even if there is a loss, on abundant caution, sometimes we are doing the audit because ultimately at the end of the day, it opens the gate for the litigation. But these are the practical situations, you have to take a call on that. So this is what the first poser is all about. So any further comment or any view? Fine, then where to show the credit side? Then where to show the credit side? No, I agree. So you are saying that your credit side of the account should go to other income and your debit side should go to other expense. So there will be no sales receipt or turnover in your ITR, right? It is a turnover. In fact, again I am coming back to that. What we are saying is, whatever left out is there is your profit or loss. But so far as computation of turnover is concerned, you have to make the total of both the sides. Agreed. So one way of practical solution, yes, I accept for a moment that yes, the credit side you can take it to the other income, the debit side you can take it to other expense. That is also one way of looking at it. Any other view?
Sir, in case of Bombay ITAT, one decision is there for the purpose of calculating the turnover in future and option, the total turnover, whatever you have achieved, either it may be sell.
That is absolutely fishy. It is impossible because otherwise every day a person, even if he is entering into one transaction, he will be subject to tax audit. So no, there is one old High Court, Bombay High Court judgment of Royal Kushan Vinayal. It was in a different context, but they say that you cannot take the gross value because that is an amount of the gross value. Otherwise what happens? If I buy one lot of Reliance, one lot is equal to 250 shares and the price is approximately 1,000. So in couple of days you will be subject to tax audit. So that should not be,
But for that, I am seeing a practical situation. From one of my client case, I have represented the case also. There is one decision of Bombay Tribunal of 2001 in which they have specifically mentioned that the particular AD is not applicable in case of if you execute intraday transaction or future and option transaction. But the same situation, another decision I have found out which is pertaining to 2014 from ITAT Bombay also. In that it specifically mentioned that the future and option the total amount has to be considered.
I agree, there may be very, different judgment from the different tribunal, but then we have to see the reasoning of that particular judgment. So far as, my view is concerned, it cannot be gross value. Otherwise, as I told you, everyone who is dealing in, this derivative segment will be subject to tax audit on everyday basis.
What even you have told in judgment name?
Royal Kusan Vinayal Limited.
One more out.
Yeah.
How to pass the accounting entry for the year-end open transaction?
There was a special program when myself and Manthan were here and we had prepared one PowerPoint presentation. If you want, I can share with you. So, I will give it to Harit and in turn, all the branch members can get the copy. But we have in detail, in-depth, special 2 hours program was there. And exclusively Manthan has prepared all these accounting entries in PPT mode. So you will get a copy of that PPT presentation. It will, it will be very clear in your mind. Because right now, if I will touch upon that subject, then we will be, having no time to deal with other projects. Okay, so we go further. What we have decided, he is my partner and a very bright young chartered accountants, and it is always my belief that our city has many young chartered accountants who should be given priority and opportunity. They can write well, they can speak well, but our duty, like myself, Sanjay, we are always trying to be mentor for them. So what I have decided that whenever I go for any lecture or in a capacity of faculty, I always carry 1 or 2 young chartered accountants, so that in future, after 5-10 years, you will find Manthan along over here. So what we have decided, that in tandem we will work. Some posers he will take. Whenever need arises, I will interject.
Good evening, friends. The second poser. Mr. X is engaged in 2 businesses, namely trading business and acting as a commission agent. The total profit from both the activities was rupees 4 lakhs. The turnover from the trading business was rupees 70 lakhs. The gross profit from the trading business was rupees 7 lakhs. And the total commission income was rupees 10 lakhs. The indirect expenses total to rupees 7 lakhs. Whether the assessee would be covered under the provisions of section 44AD read with section 44AB. Now the question that arises is the first question that arises how to compute the turnover for the purpose of section 44AD. Now whether commission income would be included while computing that turnover for 44AD or not? No. So the second question that arises now is the turnover is 70 lakhs, 8% would be 5 lakh 60,000. But where do we compare, what do we compare with that 5 lakh 60,000? What amount of profit? Would we compute the net profit from both the businesses or net profit from only the trading business? So the next question that arises is, suppose I am an assessee who does not maintain 2 separate books of account, one for trading, one for commission. I maintain a hybrid books of account that is both for trading business and commission business. Now how do I compute my net profit from the trading business separately and my net profit from the commission business separately? Because the indirect expenses that I have incurred of rupees 7 lakhs, those would be pertaining both for trading businesses as well as commission business. So the moot question that arises here, why this poser is here, is how do I compute that net profit for trading business?
See, this is very real life situation. Many of our clients, when they come to us, they cannot run their accounts as per the practical situations or the difficulties. That's our problem. Now, if you look at the profit and loss account, it's possible that he is doing some trading on his own, as well as he is acting as a commission agent. Now, this is a real life situation in one of our clients' case. So, Manthan will give the answer what we have done, but this is happening. So, we are missing sometimes the point that whether he is subject to 44AD audit or not, that is to be seen. And in a way, we can increase the profits and opportunity.
I would like to invite any one of your views, because there is nothing which has been specified anywhere as to how do we compute the turnover. So if any one of you would like to give your... Yes.
Those who are direct expenses will be taken directly to their business, and in common business we have to be estimated.
Exactly. So that's what our view is also. So what we would be doing is the direct expenses would be directly apportioned to that business only. That is to say, suppose trading businesses would direct expenses would be debited against that expense. But for the common expenses, we would need to have some scientific method or scientific basis based on which we can apportion that expenses into trading business and commission business. So one of the scientific method that we have been using is we can apportion on the basis of the GP ratio and the amount of commission. Because in effect the GP would be, because in commission business what we would be crediting would be only the net of the debit and credit. So we cannot compare that with the turnover of the trading business. So we can compare that commission income with the GP ratio and then apportion in that ratio only. And based on that we can derive on the profit of the trading business, and accordingly we can decide whether audit would be applicable or not. So any questions from that? Third poser. Mr. Ganguly is a chartered accountant and partner of a chartered accountancy firm Messrs. AWC and Company. During the year under consideration, he has received rupees 40 lakhs as remuneration from the firm. Whether Mr. Ganguly is required to get his accounts audited?
Is it not his professional income? Then what is his income?
Section 21, business income is where? This is other than 28%. What 40 is in business.
No, 40B is a computation section. 40 small b says how to compute the remuneration which is allowable in the hands of the firm. So far as income in the hands of the partner is concerned, the firm is a chartered accountancy firm. The firm is carrying on the business of chartered accountancy, meaning thereby profession. The working partner of the chartered accountancy firm, when he is paid remuneration, obviously he is rendering the professional services for and on behalf of the firm in which he is a partner. So can I not say that the person who is a working partner in a firm, which is a professional firm, the nature of income which he is receiving is also professional income?
To my mind it is not there, because volume of 21, 28, 1 if you read, what 21 says that the following income shall be chargeable to income tax under the head profit and gains of business or profession. The profits and gains of any business or profit which was carried on by the assessee. Here in our case it is not carried on by the assessee, it is firm who has carried on the business. It will be the volume of 44, 80 and 80, and these are carried on by the assessee.
Very well said, Jatin bhai, but unfortunately, there is a solitary judgment of a tribunal which says that yes, the tax audit is applicable. Manthan will give the citation.
I would just like to read what the members of the tribunal had observed. The assessee had received income by way of salary, allowance, commission and interest on capital from the firm. The assessee has received the above amount from the firm as a partner. And he is a partner only because he is engaged in the business of chartered accountants and is eligible to carry on the profession of chartered accountant. Thus, we are of the considered view that the assessee had received the said amount as a professional fee professional fee as a partner from the firm. There is no dispute to the fact that the amount received by the assessee by way of salary, allowance, commission, interest from the firm is assessable under section 28 clause 5 of the Act under the head profits and gains from business and profession. And since the receipt of the assessee is more than 25 lakhs in the previous year relevant to the assessment year under consideration, we are of the considered view that the assessee is required to get his accounts audited as per section 44 AB of the Act. The citation is Amal Ganguly versus DCIT, ITA number 2135 of Kolkata of 2008.
Can it be said that partner has carried on the business of the
That is what we
Yes,
are
exactly,
saying.
that is what.
That is exactly what you are saying. We fully agree with you, Jatin bhai. But our idea was to draw the attention to the people at large and the audience that there is a judgment, there is a solitary judgment, based on which it is said that yes, he is subject to audit. However, the practical difficulty would be nowadays we are filing the returns online. I mean, he has to file the ITR 3, I think. In ITR 3, there is no provision of giving any profit and loss account and balance sheet, or even there is no provision for attachment of any tax audit report. So that is altogether a different matter. For academic discussion, we laid our hands on this decision. And there is one more judgment. In the case of Hitesh Gajaria, a very famous chartered accountant in Bombay, dealing in NRI matters, wherein the issue was a bit different. There, after the payment of tax by the firm, Hitesh Gajaria received the amount which is tax-free in his hands. And whether that amount which is received from the firm, is receiving from the firm, is part of the gross receipt or not. Wherein tribunal said that this is outside the purview of, from section 28 to 44 DA, it is exempt income, and it is not part of the gross receipt, and it is not to be included while computing the limit of 25 lakhs. So one judgment is in the case of Hitesh Gajaria, and second is Aman Ganguly. Aman Ganguly case, it is said yes, he is required to get his account audited. But this is what the only judgment we have in our hands today.
EBC and company are builders engaged in the business of construction of flats. During the year under consideration, they have received a sum of rupees 1.3 crores as advance for booking of the flats. The firm does not have any other source of income during the year under consideration. The assessee contends that since the amount received is merely in the nature of advance, it is not required to get its books of accounts audited under the Income Tax Act. Whether the contention of the assessee is tenable in law or not.
See, if you look at the posers, many times it happens that on plain reading of the posers of the case, of the study, question kept for the study, we feel that this is not possible. But it happens when a particular officer is taking up the matter, it reaches to CIT appeal level, it reaches to tribunal level, it reaches to High Court level even. So our idea was to appraise the members that there are certain situations which prima facie we may feel that okay, no, this is not possible, this is not going to happen. But when you make some sort of the research and development activity over here, you will find many unique judgments. So this is one of the case wherein it is said that the builder is accepting the advance and he has purchased, there is work in progress in his trading account, and the officer said that you have received the amount in excess of 100 lakhs. The argument was, the word is not sales or turnover. The argument was, it also includes gross receipt. So something which you have received towards business, you are carrying on the activity. It's a different matter that the document has not been executed with the purchasers or customers. So this is a case wherein prima facie, I also feel that the tax audit is not applicable. But yes, it is applicable, and I think whoever he may be, just for the sake of understanding, we have, because advance, normally what happens, in other activities, the advance is given is for a shorter period of time. If I am buying some machinery, or selling some machinery and I am receiving the advance. I agreed, maybe. You can take the example of any, either manufacturer or builder, but normally what happens, that when a building of 10 floors or 14 floors is there, you are given the possession after 2-3 years. So by and large, the builders are receiving the advances from the customers. And wherein it is said, the judgment is very important, very interesting.
So the point taken in the judgment is members were of the view that the term used in the section is gross receipts. They have not stopped at the term sales or turnover. They have also included gross receipts. And when the builder received advance, that advance would be for the cost of the building as well as the profit element. And therefore that would be included as a part of the turnover. For a reference, I would be quoting what the members had said. Each and every word used in any provision of the statute is having importance and used by the legislature after much deliberations. The words used in the section 44 AB are total sales, turnover or gross receipts. And therefore gross receipt has been used specifically, and the scope of the word gross receipt is quite wide. Otherwise the legislature would have stopped after using the word sales or turnover. The learned counsel for the assessee has not been able to show as to how the amount of rupees so and so received as advance from customer will not be included in the term gross receipts. These amounts were having element of profit. The amount of advance was to be adjusted towards the cost of the flat and the amount of advance must be having cost of construction as well as the element of profit, which may subsequently be bigger in proportion when the whole of the amount fixed for sale is realized. But it cannot be said that the amount of advance will not be included in the scope of the word gross receipts. And
So
therefore,
interestingly, in the profit and loss account or trading account, there will not be any sale. There will not be any sale, but you will be subject to tax audit.
In that case, in the year of sale, what will be, you have to carve out from that, and we are shown. In that case, in the year of sale, what will be, you have to carve out from that, and we are shown. In that case, in the year of sale, what will be, you have to carve out from that, and we are shown. In that case, in the year of sale, what will be, you have to carve out from that, and we are shown. In that case, in the year of sale, what will be, you have to carve out from that, and we are shown. In that case, in the year of sale, what will be, you have to carve out from that, and we are shown. In that case, in the year of sale, what will be, you have to carve out from that, and we are shown. In that case, in the year of sale, what will be, you have to carve out from that, and we are shown. In that case, in the year of sale, what will be, you have to carve out from that, and we are shown. In that case, in the year of sale, what will be, you have to carve out from that, and we are shown. In that case, in the year of sale, what will be, you have to carve out from that, and we are shown. In that case, in the year of sale, what will be, you have to carve out from that, and we are shown. In that
Obviously.
Suppose 5 crore rupees you have received in the last year when you.
I agree. It is possible that one particular amount is.
Balance is less than 1 crore rupees.
Yes.
You are showing 10 crore rupees.
But I think we are talking about builder. Every year he will have either the sales or the gross receipt in excess of 100 lakhs. Because one flat is costing around one tax audit limit minimum. I got your point. What you are saying is it is possible that if the particular amount is considered for the purpose of computation of gross receipt once, it cannot be used again in the next year for the purpose of computation of the limit for the turnover or sales. I agree. That argument can be taken up.
Receipts may not exceed, but turnover may exceed.
I agree, but what he is trying to draw the attention to all of us is, if a particular amount is considered once, it is not possible to again consider the same at the time when the accounting entries pass from advances to sales. So you have to carve it out for a moment, but practically this is not going to be the case.
The citation is 92 TTJ 215. DCIT versus Gopal Krishan Builders. Lucknow bench.
Okay. Form is not to deduct the TDS, because there is exemption if you are paying remuneration to the partner, interest as well as remuneration, there is a provision of deduction of TDS. Even if you do not consider it for the purpose of tax audit, at present, even if I don't agree with this decision, the amount of remuneration which is being paid to the partners and the interest up to 12%, whatever that limit is there, it is not subject to TDS.
R Limited is in a varied range of businesses, namely business 1, 2 and 3. The Director of Finance is of the opinion that while disclosing turnover for computing the ratios to be disclosed in the tax audit report, product-wise information must be given to show a better picture of each of the business activities. The auditor opposes the treatment since in his opinion the turnover should be given qua assessee and not qua business. Advice.
There may be certain poses which are which are very small and bit clarificatory, but in our day-to-day practice we hardly look at certain issues which are quite clarified by our institute in the guidance note, as well as way back when I started my practice, we had a book from Nani Palkhiwala, the exhaustive guidelines from the eminent author Mr. Palkhiwala, and the form 3CD has been changed 3 to 4 times since 1984-85. So certain clauses are continuously being added, and when the clauses are added, we are discussing, we are studying, and then we are forgetting. So there are certain poses you may find that they are a bit clarificatory in nature, but very important in our day-to-day practice.
So what do we need to do? Do we need to show the ratios business-wise, or do we need to show them assessee-wise as a whole? Exactly. That is what even the institute has recommended in the guidance note, that these ratios are to be given assessee-wise and not business-wise. And even for all practical purposes, for the e-filing site, you do not have any other option also to do it qua business. So it is to be done qua assessee. Further, the director is of the opinion that the net profit to be considered for computing the net profit ratio is the net profit after tax and not the net profit before tax. Yes, so the net profit that we need to take is the net profit before tax. While mentioning the figure of stock in trade, the director included the value of finished goods, raw materials and work in progress. Advice. So for purpose of computing that stock in trade to turnover ratio, do we need to take only the value of finished goods, or do we need to take the value of the work in progress also as well as the raw materials? Sorry? So in this regard, there is in the guidance note, the institute has said we need to take only the finished goods for the purpose of this ratio. The logic
this is very practically when we are relying upon our staff, article clerks and some juniors, and they are preparing the ratios. calculating the ratios, and they are just giving to us for the checking purpose. We hardly lay our hand on the issue that whether the stock which is there in the trading account is taken correctly. Only items which are finished goods items are to be considered for this particular ratio, and this is a very common mistake that we have observed. That is why it is one of the reasons that we have kept this poser over here.
So the institute says we need to take only finished goods. Now the logic that has been given is we need to give stock in trade to turnover ratio. And when we are giving something with reference to the turnover ratio, we need to take only the finished goods because only then it would be comparable. The company was not under audit during the preceding year. The director is of the opinion that previous year's figures need to be mentioned so as to ensure comparability. Exactly, when the previous year is not under audit, we need not give the figures of ratio and we need to leave that blank. A private limited company purchased an asset and the interest paid on the capital borrowed for the acquisition of the asset till the time the asset was ready to put to use was expensed in view of the fact that asset was not a qualifying asset as per the provisions of AS 16. Whether the company can claim such interest under the provisions of Income Tax Act and the reporting requirements of. Now whether that interest would be allowable to me under the Income Tax Act?
There is specific provision.
Exactly. So there would be difference in the treatment as per income tax and as per accounting standards. And we cannot claim that as per provisions of 36(1)(3). And there is a specific clause in 3CD wherein you need to report that interest that is inadmissible as per 36(1)(3). So this need to be shown in that clause, which is normally left out by us.
A is carrying on the business of trading in cement bags in his proprietorship firm, which is covered under tax audit. He had received in cash advance of ₹5 lakh from 4 individuals for supply of cement bags. However, no cement bags were supplied to them due to non-agreement on price between them, and Mr. A returned the amount to them in cash. A is submitting that as these were the trade advances received, they are not covered under the loans and deposits. Again, this is very practical situation. Many of us are only advising the clients that if you accepted the cash loans, so that you have accepted the advances, and then as the goods were not delivered or the agreement, some of the terms were not acceptable to both of us, I am just returning the cash to you. So, so as to get out of the provisions. But here as an auditor, the reason of keeping this poser was that as an auditor, we have to see whether in past any transaction has been taking place between these two companies or two entities or not. Simply for, getting out of the problem, if such type of planning has been made, and as an auditor, it is our responsibility to mention what are the facts. Now again, I am just touching upon the issue that there are certain issues wherein we have the difference of opinion with the management, and we have prepared one draft note which again we will circulate through the branch, that when we are uploading the tax audit report in 3CB report, there is any other issues or any other clauses or something wherein we can put the additional notes over there. That is number one. And number two, when you are scanning your P&L account and balance sheet and you are attaching with the tax audit report, you can again prepare your notes, maybe accounting policies, maybe change in accounting policies, maybe capital versus revenue expenditure, maybe 1480 allowance. There may be number of clauses for which you may have the difference with the management. You can use that facility, you can upload your notes and keep a copy of all these notes with you, so that if in future, if the assessing officer or the department is taking some view against the company or management, the management will not be in a position to say that it is your view, it is not our view. So whenever there is a difference of opinion with the management, it is our duty as an auditor to prepare the note, upload it along with the tax audit report and keep a copy with your file. So that is what the idea was.
When we are uploading the audit report, which is accepted by the assessment, that is connected.
Of course, we are keeping the digital signatures of ours and clients at our office only. So we know that client is no option but to accept it. But however, there may be some issue of differences in future. There are and no client is so faithful and loyal that he will be with you like your wife for the rest of your life. So next is XYZ Private Limited has procured a loan of rupees 20 lakhs from State Bank of India and a secure loan of rupees 15 lakhs from ABC Finance Limited. The CFO of the company is of the opinion that such loan is not required to be reported for the purpose of clause referring to reporting of loans exceeding the limit under section 2 SS of the Act. auditor opposes to the said view comment. See, this section 269 SS and T, there is one view that these two sections are given in the PCD report or the form just for the purpose of computing the limit. So there is one view of looking at it. Second view is that you have to take these two sections in its real sense and you have to report something which is against these particular sections. I mean, there is a view that if there is a breach of these two sections, then only we have to report. In my view, it is not that. It is just for the purpose of computing the limit of 20,000, these sections reference are given over here. Now the issue is, in the poser, if I am obtaining a loan of rupees 20 lakhs from State Bank of India, should I report? Why? It is from bank. And a loan of rupees 15 lakhs, a secured loan against the mortgage of maybe car or any other asset from ABC Finance Limited, which is an NBFC. Yes. So normally why this poser is kept? Yes, I mean most of the posers we will agree to it. Idea is again at the cost of repetition I am telling you that secured loans are normally being ignored while we prepare these types of report. So all these car loans and some machinery loans from NBFC like Reliance and others, this is Bajaj Finance and Kotak, that we are by mistake or by ignorance we are not showing the details of the loans which are accepted from the NBFC. Next person, yeah. Sorry, yeah, TDS. And interestingly, they are not informing you. Once you deduct the tax, you inform them, give the certificate, and then they will reimburse you. ABC Private Limited obtained loan of rupees 15 lakhs from XYZ Private Limited, which was repayable on demand in the year 2010-11. Why this 10-11? Yes. Okay. The company had repaid a sum of rupees 5 lakh during the year under consideration. The company wishes not to disclose the sales sum in tax auditing. The company accepted the loan of 15 lakhs. It repaid rupees 5 lakhs. And the company said that I will not allow you to report the repayment which is made by the company. Is the company correct? I think repayment has to be shown. It has to be shown. Manthan has some different view.
If you refer to section 269T of the Act, it defines the term loan or deposit. Now 269T says in case of corporate assessees, the term loan means any loan which is repayable after a specified point of time. If I may read the section, it says loan or deposit means any loan or deposit of money which is repayable after notice or which is repayable after a specified period. Now in this case, the company has obtained a loan which is repayable on demand, not after a specified period. So that would not be covered within the meaning of loan or deposit for the purpose of section 269T. And in that case, if you refer 269 SS, SS defines loan as any loan of money. So for the purpose of 269 SS, you need to report that particular loan amount. But for the purpose of 269T, that would not be included. Now that was the case for a company. For any other assessee, 269T again says loan or deposit means any loan or deposit of any nature. So the point is, if you are assessee other than company, you need to report this loan because it would be covered under the term any loan. But in case of company, you need to report only those loans which are repayable after a specified point of time. So if the company takes any unsecured loan from any person which is repayable on demand, the company did not report the repayment in the PCD report. Only the procurement is to be reported in 269 SS clause.
Jatin, we agree? This is again very interesting situation, and like this, I mean, this is one of the requirements which we are not required to report, but still we are doing it because it's control C and control V are two very fundamentally excellent keys which we have. Similarly, I have observed that in the clause with reference to section 48(2)(b), if you look at the list of relatives and associate concerns, શાળાનો ભાઈ કે સાસુની બેન બધાને આપણી ઓફિસમાં ખબર હોય કે આ આનું સગો છે. We are just putting all the unwarranted details in this report. Make sure that who are relatives as per the Income Tax Act. Make a list, prepare a list, make sure the payments are made to them and then only report. Because when you are reporting, it is going to be there in the hands of Income Tax Officer, and then he will start asking you whether the expenditure is reasonable or not. So, I mean, it's an offshoot issue which we are discussing, but yes, we are unwarranted information and the details are given, particularly in the section, the clause with reference to section 48 2B. DEF Private Limited issued 1 lakh shares at a price of rupees 500 in the year 2011-12. The fair value of shares was rupees 100. Out of the issue price, the company received a sum of rupees 1 crore in the year 2011-12. The company thereafter received a sum of rupees 4 crores in the year 13-14. Whether the receipt would be taxable in the year 2013-14 in light of the provision of section 5627B of the Act also discuss the reporting requirement. Now, if you remember and recollect 2 years before, there were many changes in Form 3CD. And I remember it very correctly because there was a blackout period of 1 month wherein no form was available and you were supposed to file the return of income and the department was saying that you file the return of income and then get your accounts audited. And fortunately I gathered some courage and filed a REIT before the Gujarat High Court, and we got extension in that particular year. But why I'm saying so, there were many clauses which were added, and this 5627A, 27B and TDS. These were 3 main important clauses which were added and made our life very difficult. Here the issue is, first of all I will explain you the issue. Section 5627B was introduced from 1/4/2012. The budget was there on 28th February 2012. So from 1st of March to 31st of March, many enthusiastic companies issued the shares. It was called one-time entry. The government came to know about this one-time entry business. So they tried to plug the loophole. But unfortunately or fortunately for the companies, there were 30 days in their hands. Many companies issued the shares at a hefty premium. The company had no reserves, no future plans, nothing on paper. Everything was on paper, nothing in reality. What happened? That the shares were issued at a hefty premium. Say, here it is, some amount is given. But there was a lack of trust. I issued the shares. Harit subscribed the shares. Harit has to give me the check. I had to give the cash back to him. But there was an amount which was not matching between us. So what I thought, that I would give check of 50 lakhs, he will give me cash of 50 lakhs. Again the second round, third round and fourth round. In this process, that 30 days period was over. What happened? In my balance sheet, I issued the shares and the part which was not received by me towards share capital was shown as calls in areas.
What shown as?
Calls in areas. Am I clear what I am trying to explain to you? Because this is the area and this is the issue which is very burning in current times, because the assessment year 13-14, 14-15 and now 15-16 will be there. Number of cases are there in Ahmedabad wherein during the course of assessment it has been found that the shares were issued before March 31st, 2012. Okay. 5627B was made applicable from 1/4/2012. So there is a common understanding and belief that the shares are issued before 1/4/2012 and hence 5627B is not applicable. One of the smart officer argued with me, he said, read the wordings of section 5627B. He said, the word used are the consideration which are issued after 1/4/2012. It never says that the shares were issued after 1/4/2012. The shares were issued before 1/4/2012, but part of the amount was received after 1/4/2012 in financial year 12-13 and 13-14. So now assessment year 14-15 assessment is going on, and he is telling to me, he has given me the opportunity why addition should not be made under section 5627B, because part of the consideration has been received. I am just reading the exact wordings for your benefit. where a company, not being a company in which the public are substantially interested, receives in any previous year from any person being a resident any consideration for issue of shares that exceeds the face value of shares. All it says, you received the consideration in any previous year for the issue of shares. Now it never speaks about the issue of shares after 1/4/2012. So even if the shares are issued before 1/4/2012 and the consideration has been received after 1/4/2012, you are still hit by section 5627B.
In that case, 56(7)(b) will be on 3 crore rupees or 4 crore.
The amount which is received after 1/4/2012.
So received after 1 or 4
Yes, so the part which was received before March 31st, you cannot be taxed.
received is 1 crore, you have received 4 crores. Out of these, market value is 1 crore. The net taxable will be 3 crore and not 4 crore.
Yes,
Though you have received 5 crores, 1 crore is the cost. Here is the-
obviously, something which is in excess of the fair value,
3 crore can be taxed.
Jatin bhai,
Receipt exceeding the market value.
Jatin bhai, what I am trying to point out is, there is a common belief which can be fighted out. No problem, we can fight on that. But there is a debatable point which is missed by many, that they believe, or we the chartered accountants and the clients believe, that as I have issued the shares before 1/4/2012, section 5627B is not applicable to me. That is not the case. It still requires to be tested, I agree. But the issue is very relevant and very, very debatable. You just cannot brush upon it or cannot ignore it. Because the word used is a consideration received after 1/4/2012. Not the shares are issued after 1/4/2012. So if it is so, and if some part is still there and received in the year 15-16, then in this year also I have to show in 5627B.
In that case, in each year you have to have a deduct the market value.
No. Market value is to be computed when the shares are issued.
That is not mentioned here. The wording of the section what
Huh.
receives in any previous year from any person being a resident.
Hmm.
Any consideration for issue of shares that exceeds the face value.
Stop. Issue of shares and in excess of face value. You have to read like that. You have to put certain commas because if you remember, some seniors were always advising us that you keep some commas in your pockets while reading and interpreting the income tax law. So you stop there. After consideration, put a comma. Issue of shares in excess of fair market value. So shares were issued before 31st March 2012. You have to just see the fair market value at the time of issue of shares only. So this is, to me, is very important issue and we all should keep in mind. Next.
The turnover of Messrs. DEFL company is rupees 40 lakhs, and accordingly the company is required to pay its service tax liability on receipt basis only. During the year under consideration, no payment has been received by the company, and therefore the service tax on the aforesaid sum of rupees 40 lakhs was shown as current liabilities in the balance sheet of the company. The tax auditor insisted that necessary disclosures be made in the tax audit report in view of the provisions of section 43B of the Act. However, the CFO of the company was of the view that no disallowance could be made under section 43AB in light of the fact that no liability has arisen under the provisions of Service Tax Act. Advice. So, which view is correct? The view of the chartered accountant or view of the CFO?
Chartered accountant, somebody says, we are chartered accountants, so we will always say chartered accountant correct.
So, to decide.
See, actually, while preparing the tax audit report and while preparing the return of income, what we see is that in current liabilities, what is there? Tax payable. Tax duty or other sum of like nature, including bonus, PF, ESI, and bank interest, etc. Now, whether that amount of tax is payable or not is to be seen. See, the simple question is, we commit the mistakes in our offices also. Idea of today's meeting was to draw the attention of the audience on certain issues which is quite possible that we are committing mistakes. But here the question is payable under which act? I have to just look at section 43B of the Income Tax Act, or I have also to look at the provisions of the particular act under which I am supposed to make the payment of tax. That is the moot question.
if you look at section 43B of the Act, 43B uses a language like any tax, duty or cess which is payable under that law. That law means the law under which that particular tax or duty or cess is levied. So in this question, whether the assessee was liable under the Service Tax Act to make the payment of service tax? No, because his gross receipts or the turnover was less than 50 lakhs. So he was not liable. So when he is not liable to pay service tax, he is not required to pay service tax. And therefore there is a question of disallowance under 43B does not arise. Now the provisions of 43B are introduced so as to discourage the assessee from delaying the payment of service tax. But when the assessee is not at all liable to pay service tax, you cannot disallow that particular sum. And therefore the view of the CFO is quite correct that such sum is not to be disallowed under section 43B. And we even had a judgment.
Yeah, that is true. I agree. See now, the question Jatin Bhai is that you are collecting. Agreed. If you are claiming and not paying, it is allowable. The issue remains. Idea of keeping this proposal was to draw the attention of the audience that payable is to be looked at from the provisions of the particular act and not under the Income Tax Act. That is a small issue which we wanted to highlight.
The Chennai bench of ITAT had in 116 TTJ 964 dealt with this issue. Real Image Media Technologies Private Limited.
Proposal number 12, as I discussed again in between that there may be difference of opinion between the auditor and the management, and you have to prepare the note and keep it with you. That is the only issue. Proposal number 13 is the proposal which I will just try to first explain to you. ABC is a printing press, a proprietary concern, made turnover of about 103 lakhs, a job work charges, for the year ended March 31st. The management explained its tax auditor that it undertakes different job work orders from the customers. The raw materials required for every job are dissimilar. The raw materials are provided by the customers and there is hardly any balance of raw materials in stock except pending work in progress at the year end. Further, as per the terms of contract, any balance that remains in the stock supplied by the customer would belong to ABC printing press only. Because of the variety and complexity of raw materials, it is rather impossible to maintain the stock register whether any disclosure is required to be made. The idea is, there are many clients who are doing this job work business. The material is being supplied by the other company, and whatever is left out is to be kept by the person who is doing the job work. Now, how to account for that particular left out? And if there is a stock, whether it is required to give the details of inventory, because there is stock, there is no purchase, there is no sale. This is a real life situation. In one of our clients' case, this has happened. And how to pass the accounting entry, how to show the quantitative details, whether, because it is not his purchase, it is not his sale. So he is just raising the bills of job charges, but still he has stock. Then, if you need not report, then there will be stock in your trading account, and then you will say what? That he is not maintaining the records.
That stock does not belong.
It is belonging to him. It is. I am saying, Sanjay, it is.
Client is saying.
Client, but
Who is the owner?
he is the owner right now because he doesn't have to, give it back. He can sell it out in open market and earn profit. Sorry, one by one.
You have to show it as a stock in trade. You are not dealing in that stock.
Exactly.
You are not dealing in that stock.
So it is your stock. You are agreeing that it is his stock.
It is not my stock, it is my asset. It is my asset and not the stock.
So it is not to be disclosed in trading account.
No. You have to show it as an income. Market value of that stock will be your sales. And because you have kept it with you, it is your asset and not just trading stock. You are not dealing in that stock.
Okay.
Possession rights.
No, he has ownership right also. He is not required to return it back. Even if there was shortfall, he had to purchase from the house. If there is excess, he has to keep it. And this is very much happening in day-to-day practice. What we have done is this. Yes, you are right. It is to be shown as income. Issue remains that you have to pass the stock journal because there is a stock. You have to bring it in your trading account, either straightway to balance it or you can route it through trading account. That is not the point. Point is, you have to show it as stock. Indirectly, you have to show it as an income. Whenever you dispose it off, then it will be your sales. Right? Now the question of maintenance of inventory does not arise, as Sanjay Bhai rightly said, that he is not dealing into this particular activity. It is not his business. His business is to work as per the order of the particular person or a company. He is provided the raw material, he is raising the bill for job charges, and he is returning the finished goods. Something is left out there, he is not required to maintain the quantitative details, because though he has stock in hand at the year end, he has no purchase and he has no sales. So if you look at that clause in 3CD, the opening stock and purchase and sales and purchase return, sales return and closing stock and yield, etc. So there are certain columns there, wherein there is only stock with me, and there is nothing in opening and closing stock or sales and purchase, that it will not tally. So the right advice would be to show it as stock in trading account, and then you pass the stock journal, and you do not give the quantitative details. Okay, next.
XYZ Jewelers and
Not necessary. Not necessary. You can have. There are certain byproducts. There are certain something excess which you are. See, in yarn, I can tell you. If you look at this texturized yarn business, there's a purchase of 10,000 kg, and you may have end up with stock of 11,000 kgs. See, that is not excess stock, but you are putting certain materials which is fabricated, incorporated that oil content. If you know that strategy of producing yarn, you can add some oil into that, which is of very meager amount, and ultimately your stock value is higher by an handsome amount. Idea is, it is not necessary that you should have to have the purchase so as to have the stock. You can have the surplus from the activities which you are carrying on behalf of some other persons.
XYZ Jewelers said during the year under consideration decided to show the stock on hand as trading stock so as to avoid the payment of excise duty, which is levied on manufacturers. Advice suitably regarding the care that needs to be taken by XYZ Jewelers while submitting the tax audit report. Now, this poser is just clarificatory in nature in order to deal with the issues that the jewelers are facing right now. As you all are aware, excise duty was imposed on jewelers, and there was a lot of hue and cry all around. And the jewelers are now trying to ensure that they show it as a trading business so as to avoid the excise duty. In that case, while filing the return of income or the tax audit report, certain care needs to be taken so as to ensure that that particular thing is not plugged by the department. So the first thing that needs to be taken care of is, everyone is preparing the return in the software wherein the previous year's data is completely imported, and along with that data, the nature of business would also be imported, and the nature of business for the previous year would be manufacturers. And when it is imported in the current year, it would be showing as manufacturers only. So you need to ensure that it is changed to trading business if you are adopting this strategy. And the second thing that you need to take care of is, in the last year you must have shown the particular jewelry has been manufactured by you by showing the quantitative details of manufacture in the tax audit report. In that case, it would be difficult for you to show it as a trading stock in the current year. So you need to take care what was the treatment in the previous year in the return of income as well as in the tax audit report. MNO Private Limited adopted the weighted average cost method instead of the erstwhile FIFO method for calculating the cost of closing stock. Whether any disclosure is required in the tax audit report? Changing?
Let us first read what exactly the clause is.
The clause says we need to report change in method of valuation of closing stock. Now in this case, FIFO method or weighted average method is not a method of valuation of closing stock. It is a cost formula. FIFO or weighted average cost is a cost formula. Now the method of valuation would remain the same only at cost or NRV, whichever is lower. What you are changing is how do you determine that particular cost. Before you were determining as per FIFO or weighted average, and now you are changing how do you determine the cost. Ultimately you would be comparing that with NRV and you would be showing whichever is less. So there is no change in method of valuation of closing stock. The only thing you are changing is the cost formula. And so this type of changes need not be reported in the tax audit report.
So this is very interesting situation wherein by changing the cost formula, you can still say that my method of valuation of stock is cost or NRV, whichever is lower. And if you, everybody is aware about Tally, if you press F7, you are given the list of standard cost and default and FIFO and everything. Even by not changing the method of valuation of stock, you can change the stock value. In that situation, you are not supposed to report the change, and still you can take benefit or you can plan out. So this is possible. I will not say much on this now.
Messrs. ABC and company had paid salary of rupees 3,40,000 to Mr. Y during FY 15-16. The firm did not deduct any tax while paying the salary to Mr. Y. Mr. Y filed his return of income and paid his tax liability in the month of August 2016. Messrs. ABC and company has obtained Form 26A, duly certified by a chartered accountant, to the effect that Mr. Y has filed his return of income and discharged the tax liability. Discuss the reporting liabilities of the tax auditor. So where do I need to report in the 360?
Tax has not been deducted, but the other person has paid the tax while filing his return of income, and he has obtained the certificate from the chartered accountant that he has paid the tax. So this is the case. Now, should I report this, that the tax has not been deducted? The question is because ultimately the person for whom I was supposed to deduct the tax has paid the tax. And there is a provision that if you produce form number 26A, then you are not at default. But you are not at default for which section? 40A,
But
1A.
liable to interest for delay
201 interest you have to pay, yes.
till the date of filing of return, from the date of liability of deduction to the date of filing of return.
Correct.
So,
Interest has to be paid. That is number one. 40A, 1A disallowance.
Penalty.
See, there are 2-3 situations or issues connected with this. First is section 40A 1A disallowance of is 30%. It will not be there because there it is said that if you produce a certificate of a chartered accountant that the tax has been duly paid by the other person, then there will not be any disallowance under section 40A 1A. That is very clear. But so far as the clause of TDS is concerned in treasury report, there is no exemption or exception which says that if the tax has been paid by the other person, you will not be required to show the default over here because there is a default. There is a default of non-deduction of tax. So you are supposed to report in that TDS clause which is there, 34A or something. That is one part of looking at it. And the second, yes, interest has to be paid. Though you are not paying the tax, you are supposed to compute the interest and pay the interest. And again in this particular clause, on the lower side, there is 201 and 206C, interest to be paid. Interest is to be computed and you have to report in 360 report also that interest is required to be paid and whether it is paid or not. So the default is to be shown in TDS schedule or TDS clause, but 40A1A, yes, you can ignore reporting over there. That I don't know how much interest because now this software is calculating when we started our practice, we are computing 234 ABC, manually. Typist was to come in the evening and writing लगा होता था, थोड़ी भूल हो तो writing and बहुत भूल हो तो retyping. Now that era is gone, and now everything is computed by this software. But yes, the rate of increase is 1%.
Excuse me. After 34 clause છે ને TDS નો. In that there is an item that what is the amount eligible for TDS and what is the amount on which TDS has been paid. So can't we include this amount in that on what amount TDS has been paid? Not by us but by somebody else.
No,
somebody
the idea
else.
is that it is to be paid by you because you have to give the details of the payment. In that case, what happens that you are given the certificate by the chartered accountant that the tax has been paid.
My liability is not there, no.
No,
Except interest.
see there are two things. I can argue, I can stretch my argument to some extent that it is possible that I was supposed to deduct tax of rupees say 10,000. It is very much possible that he has paid 8,000, because of certain exemptions and deductions. What is required is the chartered accountant has to give a certificate that the tax has been paid on the income, which was expense for me and income for him. He has shown the income in his return of income and he has paid the tax thereon.
No, but my default will be shown. Whereas
But
there is
here,
no such
Pawan
default.
Bhai, the idea is payment made by you for the tax which is deducted. When you have not made any deduction, where is the question of payment? It will mismatch in these two columns. So if you read it again, amount of deduction and amount of payment. Here no deduction has been made. When I do not have any deduction in my hand, I have not deducted anything, how can I make the payment? Payment has been made by someone else.
Yes.
But I have not deducted anything. If you read the column, where is it? For the benefit, I will deduct. I will just tax deduction. Yeah, sorry. Total amount of payment or receipt of the nature specified in column. Meaning thereby the gross amount which is there in P&L account. Total amount which tax was required to be deducted or collected. So for example, interest is there. Now I have to show the gross interest including the bank interest, interest to bank. But when there is a question of deduction, I have to only take the interest on which I am supposed to deduct the tax. Total amount on which the tax deducted or collected at specified rate out of column 5. See, there is a special rate. Amount of tax deducted or collected out of 6.
The wordings are total amount on which tax has been deducted. Now in that case, you have not actually deducted the tax.
Now I am stopping myself. Amount of tax deducted, and then the column is total amount on which tax was deducted at the rate other than the prescribed rate. Meaning thereby, if I obtain the low TDS certificate, I have to show it here. And then the amount which is paid, collected and paid. Now where I have not, deducted and paid. When I have not deducted anything, how can I make payment?
But law assumes that I have made the payment.
No.
So
the law says that you will not be disallowed the expenditure to the extent of 30% because there is a tax neutral effect. Somebody has paid the tax, so you will not be penalized for 30% disallowance. That's it. If you produce form number 26A from a chartered accountant, certifying that the income has been, the expenditure which is for me is income from somewhere else, if he has shown the income in his return of income and paid the tax, it's not necessary that precisely whatever tax was required to be deducted has been paid. It may be more, it may be less. Idea is that the tax has been paid, the government is not at loss, so you will not be penalized for the disallowance under section 40A1. Yeah.
સેલરીમાં નોર્મલી કરે છે લોકો દર મહિને ટીડીએસ કાપવાનો હોય ને એના જગ્યાએ 31/3માં ટીડીએસ કાપીને પછી 31/3નું 24 ફોર્મ ભરીને પૂરું કરી દે છે. તો એમાં આગળના જે સમય મર્યાદામાં જે 3 ફોર્મ રહી ગયા એ ભરતા જ નથી.
ઓકે.
એના અંદર પછી રિપોર્ટિંગ કરવાનું કે કેમ?
ના, એમાં આગલા નથી કરે તો ભરવાની જરૂર શું છે? તમારે વ્યાજ ભરવું પડે.
બરાબર.
તમે જેટલું મોડું ભરો છો એટલું તમારે પહેલા મહિનાનું 11 મહિના, પછી 10 મહિના, 9 મહિના, 8 મહિના, લાઈક ધેટ યુ પે ધ ઇન્ટરેસ્ટ.
ના કે છે એલિજિબલ જ નથી. એમનું કહેવું એવું છે કે સેલરી પર ડિડક્શન એલિજિબલ નથી until the last month. એવું જ છે?
No, you are required to compute the tax in advance. You divide the tax in 12 months period and you deduct the tax every month and pay. That is what the law says. But what he is saying that practically yes, nobody is doing that. દરેક મહિને કાપતા નથી, પગાર આપી દે છે અને છેલ્લે પછી ટીડીએસ ની એન્ટ્રી કરે છે, પેલો એલઆઈસી ની પહોંચ આપે, પીપીએફ આપે, બધું જે એડજસ્ટમેન્ટ કરવાનું કરીને, and then he will decide whether to pay the tax or not. So only one quarter, I think એમનું કેવું છે કે લાસ્ટ ક્વાર્ટર નું ટીડીએસ રિટર્ન 24 ક્યુ જાય, right? I think that is okay.
પ્રશ્ન એવો આવે છે કે આપણે કહીએ કે ભાઈ વ્યાજ આટલું વધારે ભરવું પડશે તો એ કે મારા કોઈ ડિફોલ્ટ નથી, પણ જો તે એન્ટ્રી અંદર બરાબર કરી હોય તો ડિફોલ્ટ ના હોય, બધું 31/3 માં પેમેન્ટ બતાવી દે.
ના, અગ્રીડ, પણ મારા હિસાબે એમને એનું ઇન્ટરેસ્ટ લાગે છે.
એટલે આપણે રિપોર્ટિંગ કરવાનું નોટ પેન્ડિંગ એટલે
એક્ઝેક્ટલી ઇન્ટરેસ્ટ શું છે નીચે ક્લોઝ 34 માં that you have to you are supposed એમાં બે પ્રકારના ઇન્ટરેસ્ટ હોય છે. એક ઇન્ટરેસ્ટ એવો હોય છે કે તમે સુઓ મોટો ભરી દો છો, એ તમને 26 ES માં નીચે બતાવે છે, એટલે મોટા ભાગના લોકો એ 26 ES માંથી બોરો કરી લે છે. ધ પ્રોબ્લેમ ઇઝ કે જે ઇન્ટરેસ્ટ ક્લાયન્ટે નથી ભર્યું એ પણ તમારે આમાં બતાવવાનું. What exactly what you are talking about. So there are two types of interest. One is voluntary paying, which is available straight from the form 26 AS. But there is one more interest which is not paying. That you have to show it over here. There is one point in TDS which is very interesting, is that there are certain payments on which the management says it's a contract in nature, so I will deduct 2%. In auditor's view, it says it's a professional payment, payment for the professional services, and the TDS rate is 10%. Now here there is one column which I just read, that the tax has been deducted at a rate lower than the rate prescribed. Now the idea of putting this column was that if you obtain the lower TDS certificate, then you have to fill this column. But in a situation where I say, the management says it is 2%, I say it is 10%, should I report over there? Now again, this information is prepared by management. I am verifying and certifying. I am not responsible to prepare this information. Then I have to put a note, an annex along with the P&L account and balance sheet.
Messrs XYZ Limited follows calendar year as its financial year. The auditor of Messrs XYZ seeks your advice as to whether he is required to submit the audit report in form 3CA or 3CB. Also, he seeks your advice as to whether he can certify the financial statements of the company. The company is following calendar year and not the year which is prescribed as per Income Tax Act. Now, does the auditor need to certify in 3CA or 3CB?
At one place you have written limited, at another place you have not written limited.
So that is XYZ Limited.
Oh, lucky card
ના એટલે intention કઈ બીજો તો નથી.
The answer is the auditor is required to report in form 3CB, not in 3CA. The logic is, while reporting in 3CA, you need to specify why the form 3CA says someone has already audited its books of accounts under any other act, and therefore you are not required to re-audit the same, and you merely enclose a copy of the audit report along with the balance sheet and P&L. You are not required to express an opinion as to whether it was true and fair or not. In this case, the assessee is following calendar year. So, for a part of the year, his accounts would not have been audited, or you would not be in possession of the specified audit report, and so you cannot report in form 3CA. So, for this purpose, you need to audit for that particular calendar year, and you need to submit form 3CB only, wherein you need to specify whether the books of accounts show the true and fair view or not, and not form 3CA. XYZ and company had made payment of rupees 1,50,000 to a contractor for the purpose of renovation of his office premises. The said expense was capitalized by the firm. However, it had failed to deduct tax on the same. Explain the reporting requirements for the purpose of clause 34A. Now, in this case, the expense is in the nature of capital nature, so that need not be debited in the P&L account. So, the question that arises, for the purpose of clause 34A, do I need to report that particular payment?
See, there is a breach of chapter 17B. If you look at the first lines over there in this clause 34A, whether there is any exact words I will read, but the idea is that there is a breach of chapter 17B. Yes, tax has not been deducted, but if you look at the details which are required to be given, you have to see that what is debited in P&L account, total expense on which you were supposed to deduct the tax, and what is the amount of deduction of tax and payment of tax, etc. So now when there is a capital expenditure and the tax has been deducted, where to report this report? Or should I ignore reporting? Where to?
So 40A1A would not be attracted in this case because it is not a revenue. But for the purpose of 34A, you need to report, because the words used in 34A are particulars of any payment which is of the specified nature. So this is in the nature of contract, and therefore you need to report in clause 34A. The words used are total amount of payment or receipt of the nature specified in column 3. It does not specify it should be of revenue nature, it is of capital nature, anything. So for 34A you need to report, you need not report for 40A1A. The total turnover of ABC and company was rupees 105 lakhs, and the total sales return was rupees 10 lakhs. Out of the total sales return of rupees 10 lakhs, rupees 6 lakhs pertain to the sales made in the preceding year. The firm seeks your advice as to whether the firm would be required to get the accounts audited. Or do I need to only deduct the sales return of pertaining to sales made in the current year only?
So yes, you have to deduct the sales return of every
Preceding
year,
year.
irrespective of any year.
Mr. A had purchased goods worth rupees 50,000 on 1st January 2016.
Just a minute, please go back to that. 105 minus 6 or 105?
Minus 10. Any sales return. Mr. A had purchased goods worth rupees 50,000 on 1st January 2016. Payment of rupees 18,000, 18,000 and 14,000 were made by him on 1st February, 2nd February and 3rd February respectively in cash. Whether disallowance will be attracted under section 48(3) of the Act, and what will be the reporting requirements for the purpose of Form 3C.
View from the audience.
Single day.
The bill amount is 50,000. I am making payment of 18, 18 and 14 on 3 different dates. No. So it should be more than 20, but the bill amount is more than 20. It is not required that the bill amount is irrespective of this. Okay. Next would be, suppose in the first problem, A makes payment of 18,000 and 32,000 in cash on 5/5 and 10/5.
That is in the next year.
He is making payment of for the bill in the next financial year, 18,000 in cash and then 32,000 in cash. Then what will be the disallowance? Sorry, no disallowance. One view, other view. Whole amount will be taxable or disallowed. 32,000 will be disallowed. Now in the next financial year I am not claiming anything. How can he disallow? I am claiming 50,000 expense in the year 15-16. I am making payment of 32,000 in the next year. When I am not claiming any expenditure in the year 16-17, how can someone disallow my expenditure? 48(3)(a), yes, very simple answer. We must be aware. 48(3)(a) says that if you are making payment in the next year, it will be dimmed income. IPCC and financial students are, committing the same mistake, disallowed. There is nothing to be disallowed because I am not claiming anything. It's a dimmed income. You are given allowance on the principle or assumption that you will not make a breach of the provision. So you are allowed the expenditure in the year 15-16. But if you are making breach in the next year, you will be penalized in the next year by way of dimmed income principle.
If Mr. A had purchased goods worth rupees 18,000, 18,000 and 14,000 respectively on 1st February, 2nd February and 3rd February 2016 and made a payment of rupees 50,000 as a whole by cash on 4th February 2016, then what would be the disallowance if any under section 48?
Again, no disallowance. I am making payment in excess of 20,000 in cash.
On a single day.
Then we read 48(3) again. I think the fundamental principle to be remembered is the amount of payment and amount of expenditure both should be in excess of 20,000. Just look at from this perspective. You have to make sure that the amount of expenditure is more than 20,000 and amount of payment is more than 20,000 in cash, and then only 48(3) disallowance will be or dimmed income will be there.
In that case, one should issue a bill of less than 20,000.
Yes. If I have different bills, each of less than 20,000, and if I am making payment in cash for every bill differently, even on same day, there will not be any disallowance to my mind.
But expenditure should not be seen in totality.
I am not saying expenditure in totality. Expenditure is different for every bill.
But expenditure, nature of expenditure remains same. It may happen that you are purchasing the same thing from one person again and again, and it is getting.
What is wrong in it? It's possible that 11 o'clock I purchase something on cash memo principle. I am getting cash memo of 12,000. Again 2 o'clock I am in need of some more material. I am paying 18,000 again cash memo. And then 5 o'clock again I am going there to his shop and I am again making purchase of 17,000 in cash.
But expenditure ultimately.
Expenditure is debited differently for 3 different supporting evidences. Each transaction is to be seen. I was not aware that I am supposed to go back and buy when I am making purchase very first time. I was not having an idea that I will have to go back to him.
Mr. A and Mr. B, brothers by relation, purchased two properties for rupees 50 lakhs each. Mr. A made a payment of rupees 5 lakhs by cash on 5th February 2016 pursuant to the agreement to sale, that is a Banaka. The remaining payment was made by him on 12th March upon execution of the sale agreement by cash. However, Mr. B made the payment of rupees 50 lakhs fully by cash only upon the execution of the sale agreement on 12th March 2016. Discuss the reporting requirements for the purpose of 3CD.
You all must be aware that there are changes in Section 216 SS&T. Previously, what was happening? If a company is accepting cash of say 50 lakhs from me, it will be a breach because they have accepted the loan for more than 20,000 in cash, right? What I would say, I have a property, I have a residential bungalow, and company was company has a property and I was interested in buying. So it is just an advance given to me. I will execute a Banaka, and after 2-3 months, he will give my cash back. To plug this loophole, the scope has been now extended, and any amount of advance or loan made towards immovable property would also be considered for Section 216 SS&T. Here in the poser, the situations are two. One brother is making advance of 5 lakhs, and he is making payment of rupees 45 lakhs in cash and buying the property. The other brother is doing what? He is straightway giving 50 lakhs and buying the property. In these two situations, is there any breach of Section 216 SS or T? By brother A or brother B? A. So brother B can buy the property of 50 lakhs in cash, no problem. Okay, and brother A is making payment of 5 lakhs first in cash for advance, and remaining 45 lakhs he is paying cash as a final settlement amount. Sorry? A will be violating to the amount of 5 lakhs or 50 lakhs? 5 lakhs, okay. Yes, it is the correct answer because we have to make sure to see that what is amount which is advanced. Amount which is advanced or given as an advance for the purchase of immovable property will be hit by Section 216 SS. And end of the day, if they say that we are sorry that we are not going further in the agreement or the transaction and he will repay it, again it will be hit in under Section 216 SS, T. That's the point, advance or otherwise, but to my mind, otherwise may not include the purchase of capital asset. Is the amount 20,000?
Any other nomenclature instead of advance, therefore they will take it. This is what I think.
Exactly. If you give the name other than advance, it cannot include the purchase of capital asset. If it has been so, if it was there in their mind, it would have been very clear that any payment made for the purchase of any immovable property in cash in excess of rupees 20,000 will be hit by these sections. That is not the case. Advance or otherwise, the mode of payment, I think they are talking, it is not clear. But in my view, any purchase of capital asset, even today, for more than 20,000 in cash, is not hit by these sections. Friends, in the given time, we have tried to cover the posers of the subject, which is, as I told you, very antique in nature. And to my mind, no. You are not making any payment in cash for expenditure. Yes. There are a couple of judgments in favor and against, but I'm not much convinced about it. So thanks a lot for the hearing. Very patient. Thank you.
I'm sure everybody has enjoyed it. Thank you, Rajni sir and Manthan for such a wonderful session and enlightening.